Before we crack on with the video, I just wanted to let you know that IDRIVEACLASSIC is sponsored by Adrian Flux. I've also got all my cars insured with them, and I also have Flux Rescue, because guess what? All my cars do break down, even if I pretend they don't. If you haven't got your car insured yet, or you're looking for a new renewal quote, click the link below and get in touch with the Adrian Flux team. Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC, and today I'm back showing you this MK3 Escort for Drive It Day. Now, as many of you know, and the IDRIVEACLASSIC aficionados out there will say, Steph, you have already done a MK3 Escort. But this is the thing, for Drive It Day, I didn't want to just show you a car, I wanted to show you a car with a story. So this car, as you'll see it today, is definitely not concours, and it definitely needs a good wash. But here's the thing, it's a film car, it's used as street furniture, and therefore it can't really be cleaned because it has to stay dirty so it can be used as street furniture and just shipped in and out of shop. But the car isn't just any old film car, it's got a really lovely story behind it. So what I'm going to do in today's video is I'm going to show you around the car as we usually would on a review, take you through the dash, show you a few bits and pieces. But more than that, we're going to spend a little bit more time with the owner, finding out why this car is so special and what it means to him. And the best of all, it's one of my very dear friends, it's Kev. He's back on screen once again, but today he's not helping me fix the car. He's showing you his late Uncle Jeffrey's car, and he's going to talk to us about it. So first of all, we'll kick off and we'll go for a walk around the outside. Remember, this isn't a concours car. We're not saying it is. If you want to see a perfect car, have a look at the other review we did. So, and as well, I would say, please be kind, because today's car is very special to somebody, and I would urge you all to think about that as you leave the comments. So let's crack on. Whilst we see a lot of love for these early MK1 and MK2 Escorts, the MK3 Escort is still an affordable, interesting classic for a petrol head, but without the off-putting price tag of some of those earlier rear-wheel drive cars. Examples such as these that you see today can be snapped up for well under £5,000, and the MK3 like this was released in 1980, with production running until 1986 when the car was replaced with the MK4 Fourth Generation Escort. Now, although it's less desirable than the earlier Marks, I think the MK3 is a far more usable, enjoyable and practical classic for daily use. I mean, it's probably less likely to get nicked than an earlier one. It even won European Car, should I say, of the year in 1981, when it was pitched against, I think, the Fiat Panda and the Austin Metro, which, looking back, we can pull the flaws, but were both brilliant cars for their time in what they did and things they brought to the table. So it was quite a big thing for the Escort to win this in 1981. However, Ford were a little bit nervous because they thought, well, it's a massive change for the MK1 and the MK2, so we're going to have to come up with something decent to sell it. So they came up with a strapline as simple as efficient. And I think this example, which isn't a special edition or a trailer queen, squirreled away and mothballed, shows off that sentiment perfectly. The Escort was never designed to be some sparkly unicorn on a podium like you see it shows now. It was a basic everyday car with mass appeal. So to see this one looking like this is actually quite refreshing. Now, the car for the time was considered quite high spec, and looking at the design now in 2022 with fresh eyes and not looking at, a concours example, time has certainly been kinder to it style-wise than many other cars of the era, which sometimes end up looking just a bit crabby and dated. Now, the changes from the MK2 to the MK3 variant were quite intense actually, and they were quite good because the things that they did mean that the cars are quite usable today. Things like the independent suspension all round, front wheel drive, the overhead cam, and really it makes it a car which can easily compete for modern classic young timer status with cars which are 10 years newer. Now, there are things that I miss on this from the earlier Escorts, like the body shape, the dash, and that retro 70s lairiness of the driving experience. But these MK3s are a car which are currently, in my opinion, slightly overlooked in the market and definitely worth saving over scrapping. And if I'm honest, I'm not actually a massive Ford fan. So if you're wondering about today's example, it's a 1.3 GL, which doesn't put it bottom of the pile, but it's also not at the top either. Because in the range, I think you had Popular at the bottom, then you had L, GL, GHA, Gia, or Gia, and the XR3. Now, although the 5-speed box was available at this time because it was available from 1982 onwards, it wasn't standard on these 1.3s, and it was actually merely an option, which an option the first owner of this car apparently didn't fancy. But when we go for a drive, you'll see that I really wish we'd had that fifth gear with us. Now, another little canny fact on these cars is that for 1983, the year of this car being sold, was the first year of the 5-door variant. I'm a big 5-door car fan myself, so I was pleased to see it on this one. So all in all, this is probably a very good example of what most people remember the slightly dated Escort on their neighbour's drive looking like. No, is it cosmetically perfect? Absolutely not, but it's full of history and a brilliant story. Now, Kev's going to tell the story for us far better than I could ever tell it myself, but hold your horses because first of all, we'll love to look at that dash in more detail. Now, for me, one of the nicest things about this car being used as, you know, a used car on set and maybe would sit with a character who is, you know, has perhaps had the car for 15, 20 years and it looks a little bit past its prime, is that you feel sometimes when cars are like this, you feel like they've got a little bit more soul. Now, Kev will talk about his late Uncle Geoffrey, but before I show the interior, one of the things that I really liked about this and that Kev told me when we had the initial chat before we filmed is he said, you know, Uncle Geoffrey was a joiner, he was still using the Escort as his daily, it had a roof rack on, it had all his tools in. And one of the sweetest things is that Kev said he hasn't removed everything from the car that reminded him of his Uncle Geoffrey, because when he got the car, he'd left loads of nails in the ashtray, and he's actually left them in there as a bit of a nod to the fact that it was his vehicle, which I think is quite sweet, really. Now, looking around the rest of the interior, I know that a lot of you, and I hope that you're kind when you leave the comments, because it is a used vehicle. I mean, look around you. You've got the typical cracking in the dash, and the glove box doesn't fit quite right, but it's so nice that it's still here. So looking inside, you've got all the bits, you've got the fan belt there, you've got your booklet. It very much reminds me of my first Metro, actually, because the glove box on that never closed right either. Now, coming down, it's all very basic, isn't it? Now, I know the bottom, I think the bottom spec that you could get on these was a 1 litre or 1.1 litre? And this is kind of in the middle, a bit like its age, really, because it's an 83 car and it's a 1.3. So it's really middle of the range. It's not top of its class. It's probably one of the most normal examples of the Escort as they were at the time. This is probably what most people will remember when they think about these cars. You've got all your heater controls there, you've got your fog lights, and it's got a very basic dash. Now, I love it when you get a good basic dash. And then you've got a selection of blanking plates because I guess they were all saved for top of the range. Now, I've driven a lot of different stuff since I did that first Escort, and I remember that when I got in the last one that these 3 stalks bamboozled me. Now, over to your left, you've got your indicators. You've got your horn. Let me see if I can get that to work. And then this back one is your light. So I did have to play about with that because I wasn't entirely sure at first, even though it has got a light icon on. So tells you how tired I am. And that really is it in a nutshell. It's a 4-speed box, it's a 1.3, it's a Bobby Basic, but it is utterly delightful that it's here. Now, usually on these test drives, I take you straight into a test drive, but today I'm actually going to let Kev lead the test drive and tell us a little bit about his Uncle Geoffrey. Now, this video might be about old cars and the sentiment of them, but hey, we still get to start them up, right? So let's get it started up. I know that dash is lit up. We're going to talk about that when we go for a drive. But first of all, let's go and have a listen to the car from the back.
Hi, my name's Kevin Hurst, as a regular to IDRIVEACLASSIC, as her resident motor vehicle technician, repairer of quality pre-loved cars that Steph owns. So today we're going to talk about this Ford Escort. But first of all, I want to give you a little background story as to why I've got this car and why it is a very, very important part of my life. My 5 years ago, just coming up to, was the death of a very, very great, important person in my life and our family's life, which was my Uncle Geoffrey. He died 72, unfortunately, which was a bit shorter than life than what he should have done. He was a great influence in my life. He would do absolutely anything for anybody. He was well known to. He was a really caring, giving person, probably one of the most giving people I think I know, and I do try and emulate him in a lot of ways by trying to help people out as best I can. Basically bought this car in 2009 because he's always been interested in cars, which is another reason why we got on so well together. He bought it in 2009, as I say, and he used it as a daily driver for his joinery business. He was a very good joiner. This one had a roof rack on, wood on, and bits and pieces, just as you would use. It was used as a slightly interesting, but a bit of a banger, if you know what I mean. Not like a wedding car in front of us here. Awful. But I'm not getting mad today. So, so he used it, cared about it quite a bit, but decided that he was going to sell it. Now, at the time, in about 2011, it wasn't worth a great deal, to be honest. The Mark IIIs had not reached the sort of level that they are today, with it being front-wheel drive, as opposed to the rear-wheel drive Mark 1 and Mark 2 variants. So he didn't sell it. Now, what happened was the cam belt broke, and I rebuilt it for him. Took the engine cylinder head off. Put new valves in it, put a new timing belt on it, and made it right. So he ran it quite a bit, and then he tried to sell it again, no interest, because the body was starting deteriorating, as they do. And unfortunately, the poor chap ran out of life, and as a result of that, the car was left because it'd been sawned, and he actually left it to me specifically for filming, which is something that I've done for many years. And he introduced me to the filming chap that we do quite a lot. The car's been used for filming quite a great deal. It's been used on briefing counters, the thing that's coming up, I can't really talk about at the moment, quite a big gritty documentary about something that wasn't particularly very nice, and other various bits. So he specifically left it for me to use for filming, and that's why, in fact, he's just come back from filming. It's been away filming 2 days this week. And that's why I've got such a great affection, because every time I use the car for filming, I always think of my Uncle Jeffrey. Now, to be quite honest with you, I would rather have Uncle Jeffrey than this car, to be honest. But unfortunately, life's not like that, so you've got to make the best of things. And you keep material things, because unfortunately people die, and they're not with us anymore. But as long as I've got this, he's always in my heart, and we always think of him.
Now we're heading off for a little drive in this Escort. Now I have driven it already, it's not my first time. You can see, being that 1.3, it is a smidge gutless when we're coming up these hills, but nothing really to be concerned about or worried about. You know, she's an older lady, she's 40 years old next year, for goodness sakes. It's not going to be as sprightly as your modern cars, but I tell you what, it's a darn sight more fun. Now, coming over these hills and coming up these roads and stuff, the driving experience is really nice. It's a little bit heavy when you're at a slower speed turning in, because you don't have that power steering, but as you drive along, the steering wheel's that nice size where it's not kind of small, it's not giant like a bus wheel, and it handles, I'll see if I can show you as we come around this corner. It handles remarkably well. You're not having to do too much overcompensating, and all in all, it's really just a usable older car. And that's the joy of cars of this age, compared to things like your vintage, your pre-war, and even some of your 40s and 50s stuff, which sometimes you almost have to master the art of before you can take out. Something like this is great because you can jump in. I'd never driven it before today. I knew where everything would be. Everything's exactly as you would expect. I mean, the dash is lit up like a Christmas tree, and I'm sure many of you have noticed that. The reason for that is it has a little bit of a wiring problem. So occasionally you'll go over a bump and or it hasn't been used for a while and it's been a bit damp and it lights up like a Christmas tree. There's nothing actually wrong, and then what will happen is you'll get a few bright days and it will go back over a bump and it stops it again. Unfortunately, as is the nature with some of these old cars, occasionally you do just come up against some of these problems. Now if you're watching this and you think, oh, I've seen an example that's in roughly the same condition, but I don't know if it's going to handle like an old boat because it looks a bit rough around the edges, go and give it a try. Now this car from the outside looks down at heel, it doesn't look concours, but once you get in that driving seat and you start whipping around these roads, especially around these country roads around here, you realise there's still a lot of fun left in the old girl. And no, I'm not talking about myself. Now it's been a really interesting video to show you today. It's been very different. It hasn't been like a usual review, and it's been nice to share Kev a bit more with you because he's a really good friend and we have such a good fun, and it was nice to give Uncle Jeffrey's car a little bit more time in the spotlight because, as he said when he passed away, he wanted the car to be enjoyed, he wanted it to be out on camera and being used in whatever capacity it could be used. So I hope you've enjoyed today's Drive It video. It's been good fun taking you out for a drive, and until next Sunday when we've got something completely different and very interesting, take care and drive safely.